Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Hi, welcome back, everybody. It is a challenging time in terms of the economy. I have to say it. I can't ignore the elephant in the room. There's lots going on right now, and many of us are wondering the direction of things. Maybe you're contemplating buying a home or changing where you're living. Traditionally, springtime, one of the great times to purchase a home. Things are kind of heating up at that point. But then we also have the economy and some uncertainty there. We're going to talk with a true real estate professional. He has spent many years as a broker and co-owner of the Witry collection, real estate in Louisiana, New Orleans. And he's back with us. Rector joins us on the program. Hey, Brett, how you doing?
I'm good, Steve. How are you today?
Very well, very well. Let's dig right into what's happening. What are you hearing in terms of the economy, even in the last couple of weeks, and what's your overall vibe right now?
So, obviously, I think everybody is watching the financial landscape of the economy very, very closely, whether they're, young investors, people with 401ks, retirement accounts, that a stock portfolio. My older brother and I were speaking about this the other day, and he lives up in Indiana, and, he's concerned. But I think, a lot of people are looking. Rates have come down, not significantly, but there's probably I think that, if I remember correctly, what I read was the largest drop in rates in the last 5 months. So they're down, I just was looking at an email from a lender that I work with here in New Orleans. They're down below 6.5, which is an improvement, certainly. But on the other side of the coin, one of the things that people, I think, don't contemplate is necessarily, unless they're a real estate agent or in the know of the business, is that, there was a period not that long ago where rates were, 3%, 2.5%, and a lot of people refinanced their houses. So I think that that is impacting inventory levels to a certain degree, because why would I give up a 2.5% mortgage to buy a new house that I don't necessarily, if I don't have the need or I'm not relocating for a job, why would I give up that 2.5% and take a 6.5%? Just doesn't make economic sense. So, there's some caution, I think, in people that might otherwise consider selling, that are kind of sitting tight. I know, that's certainly a consideration for me when I look at I was one of those people that refinanced from, 4.5% mortgage down to a 2.75. So that's factoring in. There's obviously concern. We have a housing shortage in this country. That's the reality, and it's been a reality for quite some time. New construction starts and so on and so forth. These things are the reality is that, these things are going to impact the inventory levels. Things like the tariffs are going to impact inventory levels and the cost of housing, because those tariffs that are being paid by the builders, the people doing the construction, they're going to recoup their losses or their expense somewhere, and that's going to be passed on to the consumer. And then again, there's concerns with labor shortage. Who's going to be building these houses? I drive around in the neighborhood I happen to live in. There's been, a lot of new construction. A lot of the people who are doing the manual labor are really unattractive up on a roof in 98-degree heat in the middle of summer, are young Latin guys. And if they're deporting, the labor force, who's going to step in and pick that up? Type of thing. So I think there are some definitive concerns on multi-levels about how all of the sort of policies and structure of the current administration are going to impact housing on a lot of different spectrums.
I appreciate your transparency and honesty on all of this because it coming from you, it's very insightful. Did you feel, Brett, that the interest rates would be lower by now? Like, if we went back a year or so ago, did you feel that they would have kind of taken a quicker dive?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't. I am very much a realist about interest rates. The reason interest rates, I think, we have the historic lows is because of COVID and the lockdown and the impact of that had on the economy. I didn't anticipate that there would be a big change given recession and so on and so forth. They're kind of where I thought they would be at this point. If I go back a year and a half ago, when the rates first really went up considerably, yes, I was more optimistic that we would see, a more dramatic change then than where we have been for the last year. I'm not surprised that they are where they're at. I don't see, just my instinct and my gut tells me that we're probably not going to see interest rates below 6 until possibly later in the year, depending on how all of this plays out.
That being said, prices of homes. Now, I'm in the New York area, Long Island suburb of the city. We're at the highest it's ever been. And to some, a surprise in Suffolk County, where I grew up and live, and I moved around maybe, 10, 15 miles around, where I was first living when I was little. The average home price now is about $680K, and Nassau County, which is closer to the city, it's in the 800s. That's the average price. That, if you went back 5 years ago, you would lob off like $300K on all of those prices.
Right. Yes, I mean, I think I'm speaking specifically here, I think with the exception of some certain neighborhoods that, by certain people's standards would be considered not my first choice neighborhood, I think our most desirable neighborhoods, the pricing we're not seeing a dramatic drop in price per square foot. We are seeing a longer days on market time frame, among conversations. Now, this, I have to say that I've noticed an increase in business since the first of the year this year. I think people have finally come to some acceptance, a level of acceptance of the interest rates being what they are, and it's time to buy a house. We've got child number 3 on the way, so we need a bigger house. Something of that nature. People who are in the position that need to make a purchase, I think more of them are jumping on board now. But we're not seeing a big price per square foot drop in most neighborhoods, and I'm not seeing that happening across the country. Housing prices are still at highs in most areas, and so it's supply and demand. There's a shortage, prices are going to stay high, and so I don't think that is something that I foresee happening anytime in the near future in terms of the market crashing, for lack of a better word. I don't see that as being a true legitimate threat, but I do see people taking more time to make a decision. So inventory levels are a little higher, and certainly days on market. In 2021, my conversation with my seller clients was 30 to 60 days for an offer at the most. Now it's 120 to 150 days potentially. I think things are taking a little longer to move, at least here locally in our marketplace. I know that there's exceptions to that in other parts of the country where the demand is still very high and multiple offer situations still exist.
Yep.
Those are few and far between here.
Wow. And to your point, just in comparison of just any geo area, on Long Island, there's very few inventory. Obviously, things are supply and demand, so things are quite expensive in terms of homes, then taxes. I want to look closer at the properties in your area because I'm intrigued, even looking on your website, which is wcnola.com. The variation between you could go from a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 25,000 square foot home and pay $240, which is a new listing I see on your website. But then you can pivot over to something, $500, or you could go up to $900,000. Seems to be, I don't see that in other areas. Is that somewhat unique to your area?
I think, to a certain degree, yes. It's the classic old saying of location, location, location. There are neighborhoods in this city that are considered far more desirable than other neighborhoods. And, based on location and conveniences and, proximity to amenities, whether that amenity is important to you is being close to Audubon Park or being out close to City Park on Bayou St. John, or being walking distance to the French Quarter. Those kind of those neighborhoods in particular, I think the appeal of the location helps stabilize those price points. Whereas if you go further out towards the lakefront to, say, Gentilly or, Lakeview, Lakeview is still very desirable because it's, just the demographic of Lakeview, young professionals, so that has a desirability. But I think, like Gentilly, for example, you see a softer price point. You get more for your money out there, but you have to get in your car to go everywhere. As opposed to, if you buy a house in the 900 block of Aileen Street, you're half a block off Magazine Street, which is one of the main commercial corridors here in the city. And, our city is really geared toward supporting local businesses. We have a lot of small, locally owned shops, restaurants, so on and so forth. So people like being able to have that walkability factor of being able to walk to their favorite restaurant, being able to walk over to the drugstore or those kinds of things. So I think that certainly comes into that certainly factors into where you're pricing your properties when you're going on a listing appointment.
So the one on your website that's $240K, very low price, amazing. And, there's a lot of new things there. New roof, new AC system as of last year. Kitchen doesn't look like it's really, really outdated. Where is that located? Is that a distance away from a lot of things?
Let me pull what's the address on it?
7231 Pine Brook Drive. And again, I'm just getting a feel for geography. That's all.
So that's actually not in New Orleans proper.
I figured that. Okay.
That's across if I'm not mistaken, that's across the river. That's not my listing. I'm trying to pull it up real quick, but I think that's over on the West Bank. So, that's more like suburbia. And your price point is definitely always going to be, you're going to get more house for your money if you're willing to go over across the river to what we call the West Bank. Or if you're willing to go out to Jefferson Parish, out to say like Kenner, which is out near the airport, you definitely get more house for your money, but you are literally in your car to do anything. And so, so that's the big determining factor there.
Gotcha. And that is located Willowbrook, Little Woods. And it's on like you said, it's on the other side of a body of water. I guess it would be northeast of New Orleans, if I have that right.
Yeah, it's actually, that's actually New Orleans East. I'm sorry, I thought it was on the West Bank, but no, that's New Orleans East. So that's literally like the furthest point, on the eastern edge of the city. Mm-hmm. You're a good distance from anything. There's some commercial areas out there, but New Orleans East took a big beating during Katrina. and I don't think it's ever fully recovered in terms of population and return of commercial, sort of the commercial, desirability, the convenience to make it the most convenient area to live in. And certainly, if you work downtown, you work in the city, in the downtown area, you've got a pretty good commute. So you're gonna get more, certainly more square footage for your dollars there than, say, you would in Bywater, which is,
Sure.
5 minutes from the French Quarter and, right at the river and all of that stuff.
What's interesting, we'll just move on from this property. I just found it intriguing, price-wise, is you're not far from the water.
We're surrounded by water.
Yeah. So, I would think it would be another, $100K on top of that just because you're close to some water.
Well, part of it, though, is the fear of flooding.
Point. Okay. Thank you for bringing me back down to reality. Yeah.
Yeah. New Orleans East, where this neighborhood or where this property is located, that whole area was underwater.
Yeah.
As a result of Katrina. And that's, again, like I said, that's part of the price point, the reason behind the price point as well, is that neighborhood, that area, and it's a substantially large area. That area has been very, very slow to come back.
Yeah.
And we're almost 20 years out from Katrina. But there are still certain areas that have certainly had more than their fair share of struggles to get fully recovered.
And that's why you hire a qualified real estate agent to provide. Because if I'm sitting here, I'm like, New Orleans might be a nice place to go, but there's a reason, it's at that price point. Currently, what's your favorite listing? I'm sure you have some that you're like, I really like this one, and as a home for everybody. Anything that stand out for you right now?
Now, I've got a couple of things in the works, but right now I only have one listing, and that's 715 Antonine. But I think that's a great property because was a 2-unit property that was converted into a larger owner's unit and still has a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom rental. So you've got the potential for a nice income stream. I think 1221 North Tonti, which is listed by my business partner, Katie Witry. I think that's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful home. It's got an exceptional historic pedigree. It's just a stunning property. And then my other business partner, Josh, just recently listed an absolutely gorgeous home in a very, very desirable neighborhood, uptown on Jefferson. And let me think. I'm sorry, not on Jefferson, on Nashville, 1467 Nashville Avenue. I don't think that's up on the website yet, but that's listed at 2.1. But it's a gorgeous home. It's over 4,000 square feet. It's got a little rear building. It's got a swimming pool. It's got all the amenities, and that's just such a desirable address. It's right off of St. Charles Avenue. It's an exquisite property.
I love the charm. There's just something about looking at these homes, and even your listing 715. Which is going for $549,500. Am I seeing it right? There's 2 doors, and one of them could be your rental. When you look at the front of it, that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah. The door to the left is the rental. And then what they did on that particular property is they took the back half of that left-hand side and combined it with the right side and created a large primary bedroom and bath suite on that behind that area. And then the owner's unit, which is the right-hand side unit, that has exclusive access to the rear courtyard. It's a good location. It's walking distance, easy walking distance to Magazine Street. It's right off of Tchoupitoulas, which is one of the main thoroughfares, kind of from one end of the city to the other. So, if you need to jump in the car and run to the supermarket or go get downtown, Tchoupitoulas is kind of a main artery that runs right along the river. And so, it makes for quick and easy access to a lot of places.
Wow. Just a wonderful place to live. I can see what drew you from, if I remember correctly, California and Florida. You've lived, correct?
Yes.
Are there areas that you haven't explored yet that are on your mind or your radar that you just want to take a look or take a drive to? Or have you seen it all within the the greater New Orleans area?
I mean, I really think that, I don't tend to sell, houses over on the West Bank or houses out in the far side of Jefferson Parish on the East Bank, like I mentioned earlier, Kenner, Marrero, places like that. That's not my area of expertise. Those houses built of that era, ranch style houses, so on and so forth. I'm much more, even though my house is a newer house, it still has certain elements about it that make it feel more like a historic home. And, that's really my area of expertise, is being able to, talk about historic properties and why certain things are the way they are. And, I love those intricate details, those historic elements. And, so, that's my primary focus. Louisiana is a very interesting state. There's a lot of things here in general that are just different, bayous and
sure,
crocodiles and alligators and crawfish and what have you. So it's a very interesting state to explore and travel around. But I don't see myself ever living anywhere else in Louisiana other than the immediate New Orleans metro area. I live in St. Bernard Parish, but I am literally a 3-minute drive from the parish line from my house, and 10 minutes from my former home in Bywater. So to me, I'm just I will use the terminology that they used to use. I don't know that they still do, very freely in Southern California, and to say that I'm Orleans Parish adjacent. Yeah. So I can get to New Orleans, into New Orleans in literally no time. In fact, I'm headed there here in a little while to meet clients and show property out in Gentilly, and then some other clients a little later to show them a property in the Irish Channel neighborhood.
Well, I wish you luck. I wish them luck. Wonderful place to live. The Witry Collective Real Estate. You can find it at WCNOLA.com. And Brett, always great having you on here. Truly appreciate your knowledge, your insight, even on the current market, even outside of New Orleans, and looking forward next time we get together.
Absolutely. Likewise. You have a wonderful afternoon, Steve. Thank you for your time today.
You too.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.